Welcome back. This is Sunday Express, and as we talked, or rather we mentioned earlier, we're going to be unpacking 2 years of operations of Hustler Fund. With us in studio is none other than Principal Secretary Susan Mang'eni, in charge of MSME development. Karibu sana, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me here tonight.
Hustler Fund is standing too.
Yes.
What have been their achievements so far?
So much achievement.
Break it down.
I don't know how much time I have.
We'll see. We will look at it.
So Hustler Fund is turning 2 years, and we have registered several milestones. The first one, of course, being establishing credit profiles of over 24.7 million Kenyans. Those are the Kenyans that have signed up on our platform. Most of them have borrowed, but most of them, some are just came on the platform to save. And there's a milestone. Why is it a milestone? Is because many Kenyans, especially those at the bottom of the economic pyramid, the reason why you hear people complaining we are not being served in the mainstream financial sector, we are not being banked, is because there is a lack of footprints. There's a lack of data about them. There is a lack of credit history about them. So if you are not visible, then nobody will serve you. Nobody will can predict what kind of behavior you have, or your ability and your willingness to borrow and pay. So Hustler Fund has established now those credit profiles. So every individual that has been signed up on Hustler Fund platform and transacted in one way or another, there is data footprints that is left behind, which now informs his or his credit profile, which is very critical.
Now, what is the importance of having this particular credit profile? And I'm asking this question, Madam PS, because we have seen when we started off with the Hustler Fund, we had a minimal rate of around 500 shillings. Now we are doing 100 shillings. What informed that downgrade, and how then does it tie in with our credit profile?
Well, let me begin by the first question you ask. What is the meaning of this? What is the significance of a credit profile? So it's your profile that tells on your ability and your willingness to borrow and repay. So if you go to the financing sector, for them to assess and you apply, you request for a loan or you apply for a loan, they need to be able to predict, your behavior around in the credit environment, whether you can pay, you have all it takes to pay, whether you have the ability, or in simpler terms, whether you fall within the category of won't pay or can't pay. Because there are people who borrow and just won't pay and will never pay. But there are those people who just borrow and probably they lack capacity at that particular time to pay. So because of certain circumstances like shocks and you can't be able to meet your that particular obligation. So credit profile, and you see, we exist in a world of scarcity. By scarcity, I mean at any given time for you to develop yourself, to do something, and the more so to participate effectively in the economy, you must also have a credit line. So you must have a reputation with a credit line. So people must be able to trust you, to know that I can lend to you and you can repay back. So it's a very critical attribute to all human beings.
To actually access credit.
To access credit, they look at that. Because again also, the people, well, you have, let's say you have a good business idea, you want to borrow against that alone, may not know, may not tell the bank or the financial person on the other side to tell whether if I take risk on you. Now we are assessing your, it's more also speaks to the risk profiles. So what is the risk? What risk can I take, upon you? So when they're doing risk assessment, they look at where is the data, where is the footprints. Do you have credit footprints? Have you had practice? Just let me give you maybe a simple example. In the formal employment sector, and let me take an example of probably the civil service. So if today jobs are advertised, you always see people asking, you have experience.
Yeah,
you must demonstrate
experience?
certain experience. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing with the credit profile.
In the business market, you also need to have demonstrated some sort of experience in as far as credit line is concerned. Yeah.
Madam PS, now, doesn't then this seem like also the Hustler Fund is applying risk-based lending, which also commercial banks have taken out? And wouldn't this particular line of, credit or rather model, de-risking lending, lock out the very same people that the fund sought to address?
Actually, risk-based lending is not locking out anybody.
Okay.
Is a risk when it means you take some amount of risk. You elect to take certain risk upon an individual that you want to serve. So, but you again also you have to measure them. How much risk can you take? So that's why you do risk assessment on somebody. So if we don't have any data, any information, any prior information, any history about you on how you borrow, repay, how you transact, it's very difficult for us to measure the risk, the amount of risk we can take on you. So risk-based financing is not a bad thing as such. In fact, it promotes financial inclusion. In other words, you are saying, if I assess your risk and elect to say this one, I can finance this person, and maybe I will not now have to ask you give me certain collaterals. So it's your behavior, it is your practice, it is, how you live in that particular space that will make me be able to predict your ability and your willingness to borrow and repay. So I don't think it's a bad thing that is happening. And it's true. In the mainstream financing sector, everybody now is moving towards that.
Risk-based.
Because they have recognized that the MSME are not being supported yet, that the critical players in our economy. Now, but because who are MSMEs? MSMEs are women, MSMEs are young people who do not own means of production. So now we must now agree to trust them, to take some level of risk on them. So if you are going to take some level of risk on them, but there must be something also in addition. You cannot, they can't be stranger to you.
You can't just go blind.
No, they cannot just be stranger to you. There must be some parameters that and some history, some trails, some data trails about this person. Maybe he's doing this kind of business, he's borrowed here. What is the practice about this person?
Exactly. Now,
so risk-based financing is working. It's working to promote financial inclusivity as opposed to really, but so it's actually helping us to unlock
that particular access to these particular people. Now, since you've mentioned the issue of risk, we also have to look at Kenyans are holding back around 10 billion shillings owed to the Hustler Fund. How do you intend to tackle this as we look at, forward? We're turning to. Do we expect this kind of momentum in the next 2 years? How are you planning to bring this?
Thank you. So I was talking about the key milestone. So I mentioned the credit visibility, which we have established among Kenyans, and especially those who have signed up on our platform, the 24.7 million Kenyans, which represent close to 3/4 of adult population, could even be more, because we're talking about 18 years and above. Now, why do we need this credit history? To be able to assess and determine the creditworthiness of an individual that you're engaging with. And I think this is what the risk-based financing model also look at. They try to assess what is the creditworthiness of you. Are you creditworthy? Or all those. And what makes them, get to how can they take risk on you? So they have to assess. And the creditworthiness speaks to two things: your ability and your willingness to pay. So they assess your practices, your behavior, whether you have the ability or whether you're willing to pay. You show some sort of initiative. Now, again, what there are
those who don't want to pay.
So what does the of course that then of course when you're assessing your credit worthiness is to determine whether you are within the category of won't pay
or can't pay.
Can't pay.
What are you going to do with this lot? Or rather, what are we looking at?
So we'll come there. We'll come there. So 2 years down the line. So let me talk about those who are paying, because that's now the gist of all this intervention. So we've had Kenyans, and most of them have raised concerns about the inability of them to access or to be served in the mainstream financing market, because every time they go there, they're being asked about collaterals, they don't have title deeds, and majority of Kenyans are also not employed, so they will not have a pay slip which they can commit to the bank or to a circle or to a financial institution to be served. So, but so how do we support them? Because because they're not being served, so they become a target for predators, lending predators and all those sharks, Shylocks,
loan sharks and Shylocks. Yes.
So because now it's an space where there's no formality, there's nothing. So they take high risk on you, and as a result, what happen is that they will demand more from you in terms of the high interest rates. And sometimes they will really also treat you indecently, because also if you borrow, they have to keep on reminding you have to repay, or sometimes they can come and take away your possessions.
Does this happen under Hustler Fund?
No, of course, it's not hustle. I'm not in that category. So we are intervening in that space. We are trying to protect Kenyans.
So there's no that kind of harassment under
from
Hustler
such
Fund.
kind of treatment, from such kind of harassment. And where were they being harassed? They were being harassed because they did not have credit visibility. So now we have established credit visibility, where any financing institution now has somewhere to begin from, some sort of hustler data. If you want to know who is Susan, you want to assess my ways of borrowing, of doing what, if you come and cross-reference with the Hustler Fund, you'll be able to see to assess my behavior, and you can predict my credit worthiness, and you can decide on whether to lend me and even how much amount to lend me, in terms of just trying to mitigate the kind of risk probably which you have profiled on me. So now, but we have people who honestly are in need of credit. And they need credit so that they can engage in businesses that supports their livelihood. They need credit so that they can, earn a livelihood. That's where they depend. They wake up in the morning, that's where they get food, they get to meet all their basic needs. But because they don't have access, nobody's willing to lend to them because they don't know them, they fall into those Shylocks. They go to the Shylocks. So we have created then a pipeline for these people. And the 2 years experience, these people have been able to demonstrate their ability.
The 2 million people who have been paying.
People have been able to demonstrate their good borrowing behavior, their ability. So they're saying you can trust me.
The ability and the willingness to pay.
And the willingness to pay.
So what is in there for them?
So what is happening? Because they have been borrowing, and they have shown that they borrow, they repay, they borrow, they repay. They have now good credit history. This good credit history demonstrates their positive behavior around credit. So their positive behavior translates into some sort of a collateral. So you see, they can access enhanced loan amount.
Are you saying you're going to increase for those who are going?
I'm going to, but again, not just as on Hustler Fund alone. I'm saying this credit history that these people have is going to help them, is creating for them now a pipeline for to be served in the market. They, of course, will have to access the higher, they will now be accessing and graduated to higher hustler fund loan products, loan financing product. But again, from there also, they embark on a pathway where they can be served even in the bank, because we've given them a platform to demonstrate that they're good borrowers. So people should not just misjudge them and say, those people, you cannot take risk on them. They have demonstrated. So out of those 24.7 million Kenyans, if you're looking at about 2 million people whom we have opened and unlocked for them access to credit, they can now progress to another level of financing, either on the hustler fund or even outside hustler fund. So that's the impact that you're talking about, and that's the kind of intervention that we set out to do, to correct the market failure where we assume that everybody at the bottom of the economic pyramid, because they didn't have the credit history that we could use to assess their credit worthiness, that this one you cannot touch because they're high risk. To remove that tag that young people who are not employed or women who do not own means of production are all high risk. So we gave them a platform where they have been able to demonstrate. So not really, it was even some of them, it was not even a question of redeeming. They did not even have an opportunity. Nobody was even willing to lend to them.
So
to
it
give
was
them
a chance.
That practice. So they've had a chance. Some have had a second chance, especially those who are in CRB, have had a second chance to repair their credit. Now they can progress, be trusted again in the form of finance. So why are we doing this? So that we can now be able to support our population at the bottom of the economic pyramid who would otherwise not be served by the mainstream financing sector, so that they become now financially included. Financial inclusion.
So when we come back after this particular break, we'd want to find out, these 2 million are getting a higher credit, or rather room to access more credit, either from hustler fund or even commercial banks. But what happens to those who are still holding on to the 10 billion? Does the government give up on them? We'll find out soon when we come back. A quick breather, we'll be right back. The Hustler Fund turns to. Question is, has the government given up on the defaulters, looking at a default rate of around over 20%? Madam Pierce, have you given up on defaulters?
No, we can't give up. Why would we give up? They're our people, they're Kenyans. We are rehabilitating them. We still give them more chances to grow, to repair their credit, to improve their credit, and ensure that now they establish profiles which can enable them.
Are you coming for M-Pesa balances? Because that was mentioned somewhere. Just clarify. I
don't know who say that. So where I sit, we have no such plans.
Okay.
I don't know who say that.
So how does the future portend for the next 2 years?
So because it's just like a normal school learning. Let me use the analogy of a classroom. In a classroom, you go through, you learn for a certain period, you subject it to an examination, you do an exam, that those people who excel well. So when they excel well, they are promoted to another class. Those who remain behind, you take them through the same syllabus, they repeat the classroom until the time when they will, you will assess again their ability, and you see they have mastered the subject. Then you can again subject them to an exam, and you assess whether they can now be promoted, and if they pass, you take them to the next level. It doesn't mean now these who repeat or these who did not make it, you do away with them.
So what's the future of Hustler Fund as we come to a close?
So the future, the Hustler Fund is a policy intervention. If we continue having market imperfection with regard to credit access, we will always be there to intervene. We'll always create a platform where now Kenyans can have a second chance to repair their credit, grow it, start also, having experience of the, credit experience.
Do groups and circles stand a chance?
No, they will. The groups and circle will also stand a chance because they also have credit, they do credit assessment on them.
Okay.
They also have, they can also be assessed they're also supposed to have credit, to be credit worthy, to be lent to. So if we are using the parameters that assesses the personal borrowing behavior, the groups are formed of individuals. So those individuals' behavior then will be measured, you know, and that becomes their scores to determine their credit worthiness and the level of limits which then somebody can risk on them or can lend them. But let me say this, the future of Hustler Fund is that the way I see Hustler Fund from the last two experiences is that it's creating a very clear pipeline for inclusive economic growth for people at the economic of the bottom of economic pyramid. And it all begins this way. If I can access credit, I can be able to engage actively in the economy. If my credit history can be collateralized, my good borrowing behavior can be collateralized, and then replace the conventional collaterals like title deeds, which I may not have access to, then that's a good thing. It's become more transformative. Then it means just with my credit score, I can walk to a bank, they look at me, they can predict whether I have the ability or the willingness to repay, and then they can give me credit that I need to run my business. So let me look at the 2 million people.
So focus in those who have paid.
These who have demonstrated good borrowing behavior. So assuming these 2 million people, each one of them was establishing an enterprise that just employs even himself or herself, that's self-employment enterprise. Like you start a business, you're sole proprietor.
As we come to a close, yes?
What does that mean? It means you'll have created 2 million jobs. Assuming out of 2 million, we only get to progress about 500,000 of them, again, who can be supported now. This, I'm trying hard not to preempt what we'll be talking about.
I can see you struggling to preempt the president, but we know we're going to be coming 2 years.
Tomorrow, but I just want to know, what does it mean to have a good credit score?
What does it mean?
What it means to have a good credit score is that now you'll be visible in the formal financing system. You'll be served, you'll be banked, and you can be able to access credit against your credit worthiness and engage actively into the economy. That engagement could be maybe establishing an enterprise that can create jobs into economy. So then jobs means you'll be impacting to our economy.
The socio-economic development.
Yeah, you'll be impacting to economy. Right now, we are suffering because of the high youth unemployment. So if you can get an enterprise through the Hustler Fund pipeline that at least can give us even 5 jobs to the economy, that's an achievement, isn't it? Now, what does it mean to create a job? It means that you're also generating now
wealth that goes
revenue,
across or that trickles down.
And we will be so many things and many other things. So what I'm saying, so Hustler Fund will be there as a policy intervention, and I believe that pipeline is now going to become clear and clearer on how then we'll get to mobilize people at the bottom of the economic pyramid to make sure that no one is left behind in the economic participation.
Thank you very much. On that particular point, we turn to on Hustler Fund, and the question is, or rather what you need to know is that the Hustler Fund has actually been running what is called a survey on your credit worthiness. Are you willing and capable to pay? So if you are, there are benefits to it. If not, government is not willing to give up on you yet. Now we cross over to other stories.